late 1970s, I've been working in soil science.
What research have you do with the biostimulants and particularly with the steroids?
It has also improved the root zone soil microbial community and the diversity there. Now it is primarily maize, soybean, and forages or hay. I think it just reflects the way agriculture has changed in this country.
Привіт усім читачам Куркульком, а також глядачам нашого YouTube-каналу. Сьогодні ми поговоримо про те, без чого сільське господарство неважко уявити, про ґрунт, і як з ним працювати з максимальною користю для аграрія, та що сучасна наука може запропонувати сільському господарству для ефективної та безпечної роботи на землі. Про це, власне, ми і будемо говорити з нашим співрозмовником, із доктором Робертом Кремером. Це доцент кафедри ґрунтознавства у відділі рослинництва і природних ресурсів. Працював в USDA-RS дослідним мікробіологом протягом 32 років, тож досвід неабиякий. Hello, Mr. Kремер. Again.
Hello, Andre.
First question. When did your path in this science begin? While soil science and microbiology?
Oh, when did I begin in this area?
Mm-hmm.
Many, many years ago. Since the late 1970s, I've been working in soil science and particularly soil microbiology and plant interactions since that time.
Why? Did it fascinating you? What?
Oh, well, it was somewhat by chance because when I left the farm and I wanted to go to college, I originally was going to be a forester. But you know, when you get to college, you get a different advisor, and I just happened to be connected with an advisor who was a soil microbiologist, and you know, he kind of steered my way, and I became very interested in it, and I just continued to pursue that. You know, through the undergraduate, and then I was I had a lot of interruptions. I was drafted into the military for a while, and then when I came back, I decided to get a master's, and then I was in industry for a while with a seed company, and then I decided to do the doctoral. But it all had a common thread of microbiology, and that's how I've gotten to where I am now.
You mentioned that before university you left the farm. Are your parents farmers?
Yes. In fact, they are still living on the farm, and we, you know, I go there at least once or twice a week. We have to help out with some projects that we have going on, crops and some livestock. So still very well connected with the farm.
What crops grow your parents?
Well, now it is primarily maize, soybean, and forages or hay. But when when I was a younger, in my youth, we had a much more diverse farm because we had the hogs and cattle and poultry, and then we had the alfalfa and oats and wheat and clovers and sorghum along with corn or maize. But I think it just reflects the way agriculture has changed in this country. I'd say beginning 25 to 30 years ago, you know, when people decided to farm commodity crops like maize and soybean rather than doing a more diverse agriculture.
I see. So we can say that you stick to your father's path in agriculture, but in the science way.
Yes, that would be a good way to put it.
Okay, next question. Which soil indicators are most important when it comes to the soil health, in your opinion?
Yes, good question. I think some of them are a combination of the different properties, the physical, chemical, and biological properties. So something like not only just organic matter, but a fraction of the organic matter called active carbon is a very good indicator. The extent of aggregation in the soil, or the stability of aggregation, and also a particular, a biological activity indicator, which can be, for instance, carbon dioxide respiration or mineralizable nitrogen activity, that kind of thing. And then, of course, as a microbiologist, I'm a bit biased on looking at some certain activities, such as enzymes that are associated with, say, carbon cycling or nitrogen cycling, and also the overall diversity of the microbial community is also a key indicator, taken along with those other ones that I've mentioned.
These indicators, how often should soil test must be taken in agriculture to measure these indicators?
Well, the simplest and the indicators that are easiest to measure, of course, are your nutrient analysis, which can include soil organic matter. Mm-hmm. And we generally suggest that that should be taken every 1 to 2 years. The other indicators, it depends on what the farmer is doing. Is he implementing different management practices? If he's doing that, then you should be taking some of these indicators almost yearly. But if he has a set of management practices in place that he's very comfortable with, but he wants to say have an assessment to see how well the management is either improving or maintaining soil health, then every 2 to 3 years should be sufficient. Mm-hmm. And of course there's lots of other factors that can affect that as well.
So what the possibilities to use of biostimulants open for farmers?
I think it's I think it opens quite a few possibilities. Let's say, and for different reasons. Let's say if one wanted to cut back on fertilizer inputs, for example, there are some biostimulants that have organisms or substances in them that will allow greater access to nitrogen. Let's say if there's nitrogen fixing organisms in there that can help take nitrogen from the atmosphere and make it available to plants. There's a way to reduce nitrogen fertilizer inputs, and the same with phosphorus. Some organisms can release phosphorus from minerals. Conservation concerns. Many biostimulants can, improve soil structure, water infiltration, this kind of thing that will help not only water availability for the crop, but also put the soil in a condition that it will resist, let's say, erosion or other degradation like that. So it kind of depends on what the viewpoint is. Well, I would say probably the most important factor in a farmer's mind, of course, is profit. Making money mm-hmm. with crop production. Well, then, some of the biostimulants we've looked at that can give a boost to yield just by, let's say, allowing some microbes in the soil to make some important micronutrients available to the plant that otherwise they can't take up, can make a big difference. Or maybe plant growth regulators. is also a big substance in some of these biostimulants that will enhance root growth, enhance nutrient uptake. So it's for various reasons, I think a farmer could find a place to at least try some biostimulants to see if it would be a benefit to their program. But I would like to add that there are thousands of these products on the market, and so a farmer would be very wise to investigate these products first before going out and just purchasing one that happens to be on a dealer's shelf or however this is acquired, because many of these have not really been tested very rigorously. So, you want to go with those that have independent testing that have shown some performance before you invest your money into an extra product that perhaps may not even work for you.
Can you say how often U.S. farmers use any of kind of biostimulants?
I'd say it's less than 25%. That would be liberal. Especially the large farmers. There may be some that use a few things. Sometimes, you look at some of the smaller, more farmers that are doing some specific crop, or you look at the organic farming community, they would be more apt to use some of these products than others, just due to the restrictions of chemical fertilizers and all this. They can go to something like a biostimulant that is probably approved by the organic certification board.
Okay, what research have you do with the biostimulants, and particularly with the steroids? What effect of the use?
Yeah, I've probably looked at over 30 products in the last 20 years, and the steroid compound or biological products, which is includes some other compounds as well. We see some very good effects on growth, root growth of the root masses, and primarily on maize and soybean. Definitely increase, following their recommendations, which is at least, inoculating the seed with the product and then making at least one foliar application during the season. We've seen improved photosynthetic indicators on the plants, better photosynthesis, which means, more carbohydrate production that we assume goes to grain yield. It has also improved the root zone soil microbial community and the diversity there, and some root growth, root biomass. So overall, it has been beneficial from that standpoint. Now, here's the the one disclaimer, or the one fact I need to mention, is that until last year, we really never saw a significant increase in yield with these. But I know in other places in this country and other places globally that these products do show significant increases in yield. But I think because we are in an area that has I don't want to say it's an unusual soil type, but it is a little different because it has a restricted layer of clay some distance below the soil surface. I think sometimes, and the weather affects that. If it's, it can be too dry. If it's too wet, it's, you get anaerobic conditions. If it's too dry, it doesn't hold water. So I think, the climate affects the performance of this particular product in these particular soils. So I think we might be in an unusual situation. If we have a biostimulant that really works in these soils, then we really have something that's effective. And so, like I said, last year and maybe the year before, we did see some increases that were significant. More than just a few kilograms per hectare. I mean, it was more like 10 to 20% increase. So, and I think you have to see that. I don't know what the price of these biostimulants are, but I think you have to have a relative increase of something like that to offset the inputs that you're putting into this production system.
Next question. What other new development in scientific research should farmers pay attention to if they want to improve soil quality and increase results, yields?
Right. And, and I can speak mainly for, the Midwest part of the United States. And, you have to look at it from, okay, you have the very big farmers, which are very similar to what you have in Ukraine, very large farming enterprises.
Yes, we do.
Right. I mean, I've been on some of them, and they're as big or bigger than anything we have here. So they have to make a decision: can they fit these new practices into the way they're farming now? Because many times they are running up against a timeline, to get their crops planted on time. We already know that if we can reduce the intensity of tillage, is probably the most helpful practice that can be done, because especially in our area south of the very rich soils in Iowa and Minnesota, much like what you have in your prairie area, our grassland area, is that if you have too much drastic tillage, you lose soil, you're losing your organic matter, and your productivity goes along with it. So anything that can be done to conserve soil while we're raising these crops must be done. And there's been new innovations in, minimum tillage equipment and planters and that kind of thing. The other thing is how to maintain residues. In other words, the crop vegetation that's left over after harvest, maintain enough of that on the surface. I've noticed a lot of farmers in Iowa and Minnesota, they will actually harvest some of those materials for either livestock bedding or biofuel production. But you can only do so much of that. You don't want to take all that off the surface and then leave that soil exposed over winter, and it can be very devastating. So residue management, inputs of organic matter to build up not only the soil organic matter, but also keep that soil biology active and functional. And that can be done by either adding manure or compost or biochar. One of the easiest ways I wouldn't say easiest way, but easy from the standpoint that you don't have to haul things into the field is to use this cover crop concept, which is, planting certain vegetation into the field during the fallow period between harvest and planting the next season. If one can get those crops established and have living roots in the soil that are feeding the microbes, building the organic matter, other available nutrients, that would be ideal. But, I do understand that in regions where the climate kind of is not too favorable for this, it can be a real problem to try to get that out there and establish that in time. And I know that is probably because Ukraine is about 10 latitude degrees above Missouri, you're a little bit in a colder climate, and that
Yes, that's true.
so that's where I think that's where the developments are going to have to come from. I'm aware of some of these popular crops that are being used for cover crops. Some of those are being looked at to find varieties that are very vigorous in cold climates. Maybe that will help. I'm not sure, but if we continue with the system that we have, it may be very problematic to come up with some of these conservation systems to be established on the farm. It would be great if there were a way that farmers could make make an adequate amount of profit or money with fewer acres or fewer hectares to manage. But I'm afraid that is a integral part of the system that hasn't been really overcome yet.
So continue with the word if. What do soil science and microbiology have to offer for agriculture in the future? Maybe.
Right. I think there's a considerable amount that can be developed yet, and it kind of centers around the soil health concept. A lot of that needs to be defined a lot better, because now a lot of folks are getting into this particular area, and they're just assuming, well, if you have good nutrient contents and manage that well, your soil health is going to improve, and that's not necessarily so. Because as we move along, we're learning a lot more about the biology in the soil, and I think with a lot of the new developments in molecular biology that has been pretty much worked out with the human genome and all this, we can apply that to the soil environment, and I think there's a lot of there's a lot of things that remain to be discovered yet. Improved nitrogen fixation, that maybe at some point we can extend that away from legumes and into grasses like maize and sorghum and wheat. This kind of thing, and I'm not necessarily talking about genetic engineering, because that's a whole different issue, and but I mean, coming up with systems that can match these organisms together. The same for phosphorus, because at some point we're going to hit a phosphorus crisis from the standpoint of fertilization. Can we develop plants that can root deeper and access phosphorus reserves along with these organisms that are able to make it available to plants? So the whole biological thing, the different ways of understanding organic matter in soils, organic carbon. How can we help with, if there is a climate crisis as far as the amount of carbon going back into the atmosphere, can we get that stored in the soil and then still make it useful for both the microbes and the crop? So I think soil scientists can work on these, but we need to work together with many of the agronomists or plant breeders to develop these plants that take advantage of it. Many times these varieties or hybrids are developed under conditions that have the optimum nutrients for the plant to grow, and it kind of ignores what's going on in the soil. So this is why sometimes you may have a soybean or a peanut or something that is very is very good producer, but it fails to associate with the most effective nitrogen fixing bacteria. So, these crops need to be screened under realistic conditions, and then the varieties can be developed that will be fit to a particular soil condition. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of the plant breeders really get into the molecular biology and forget about the soil biology.
I see. You mentioned that you've been in Ukraine. Does University of Missouri have any relations with Ukraine? What did you do here in Ukraine?
Okay, first I'll answer the one about the University of Missouri. It does have connections with Ukraine, but unfortunately not in the agronomic or soil science area. It's more in rural development, agricultural education, and extension, and I think marketing and economics, things like that. But I have worked with them since I've been to the Ukraine and bring, what I've learned about your country to them, and I think they're very interested in expanding the components of their relationship with Ukraine. Now, I've been to Ukraine twice. Unfortunately, each time it was in the coldest time of the year, but
I see.
well, I mean, the first year was in Kyiv, and it snowed every day. But still, I'm very impressed with Ukraine people, because that does not stop business of any sort. Here, it would shut things down, but there, So I had a chance to visit with some of the very large ag landholding companies or enterprises. Went out to is it Patova? It's east of Ukraine. Poltava. Thank you. I'm sorry I messed that up. Near there, they had a very large farm. Saw all the equipment, and I must say that they had a very state-of-the-art soil testing facility. They used the GPS variable precision ag systems, and so I was quite impressed with that. And I'm assuming that is the way a lot of the agriculture is run in Ukraine, is through there. We also went to another company that was not quite that large. The first one, I remember the name was Colonel, right? That's one company. The other landholder was not quite that big. We went to another town and had a meeting there. But the infrastructure for these is very impressive. They have their agronomists, economists, their soil scientists, and they all came to the meeting, which was very good. So I got to go on site a little bit at that point and just learn a little bit more about how their agriculture is, which really isn't that much different than here in the States. You even have the green and red equipment that we have, So that was, I left with a good impression. The second visit last year was to Lviv, where there was another large expo where we met, and at that time the weather was much nicer. We had a chance to go to a farm, say maybe 20 or 25 kilometers away from Lviv, and he showed us his operation, and he had a small operation, even though it was 10,000 hectare. That was a lot smaller than some of the others. But what I was impressed with his operation is that he was building a lot of on-farm grain storage at the time, but he was very diverse, much different than what we see here. He was growing at least 5 or 6 different crops: maize, soybean, wheat, barley, canola, sunflower, and then he also had a fairly large plot for vegetables, which I guess he was using for the market in the nearby cities. So
Mhm.
But at the same time, I did notice that on some of his fields, not very good conservation practices were being followed, tilling up and down the slope and all this kind of thing. But that may be something that could be changed at some point. But overall, I have a very good impression of Ukraine agriculture.
Hope you will have the opportunity to visit our country again, maybe in the warmer part of the year.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
So you can see the our fields and our soil in the proper way.
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, yes. I know you have in your richer soils are very similar to what we have in the prairie soils of upper Midwest, Iowa and Minnesota. So you have very deep black soils, high organic matter. And I think the only difference is perhaps your rainfall might be a little bit less, or your rainfall patterns are a little bit different. Many of the one comment that was fairly common among many producers or the agronomists were, we want to achieve yields that you have in the United States. So this is why a lot of this technology is very appealing to your farmers.
Thank you for your time and expert opinion. It was very interesting conversation, and I'm sure our subscribers find it interesting and useful too.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to visit with you all, and I hope everything is going well for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And bye.
Bye.